Well, good morning and welcome to the Lynnwood Times candidate interview with Lynnwood City Council candidates for Position 1, Shirley Sutton.
Yes, correct.
And Nick Coelho. I am your host, Lynnwood Times reporter Bo Brusco, and I am joined with Lynnwood Times publisher Mario Lottmore. To start, we're going to do a brief little biography, little bio of both of you. So starting with Shirley Sutton. Elected experience, she is a former Lynnwood City Council member and a Democratic Precinct Committee office. Other professional experience, Edmonds Community College. She was the Executive Director of Diversity Affairs from 2006 to 2013. Director of Equity and Diversity from 2001 to 2006. Yakima Valley Community College Director of Adult Basic Education, English as a Second Language from 1998 to 2001. Yakima School District Number 7, Director of Homeless Programs from 1994 to 1998, Administrator of Career and Community Activities from 92 to 95, Director of Staff and Student Services from 89 to 92, and Manager Labor Relations from 1986 to 1988, and lastly, Burlington Northern Railroad from 1984 to 1988. She holds a Master's in Education, which she earned in 1997, and a Bachelor's of Law and Justice, which she earned in 95. And lastly, her community service includes Chair of Neighborhood Demographics Diversity Commission in Lynnwood, Urban Lounge League, NAACP, Black Women's Coalition United Way, RSVP, which is a Senior Volunteers Program. All right, and then Nick Coelho is a lifelong entrepreneur and a local small business owner, as well as the current chair of Lynnwood's Park and Recreation Advisory Board, which he has served on for nearly 3 years. His volunteer experience includes 18 months on the South Lynnwood Neighborhood Co-Design Committee, weekly shifts at the Lynnwood Food Bank, Lynnwood Food Bank, and frequent event planning for charity fundraisers. He has been endorsed by Lynnwood Mayor Nicola Smith, Lynnwood City Council members, both current and former, elected Democrats, South County firefighters, the Lynnwood Police Guild, the Teamsters, the Affordable Housing Council, and the editorial board of the Daily Herald. Very cool.
Thanks.
All right. Excellent.
Oh.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to start with our first question here. And I'll ask Shirley the first question, and then I'll ask it to you, Nick, and we'll follow like that. All legislative and policy-making powers are vested in the City Council. What inspired you to run for office, and what will your top 3 priorities be if elected?
Well, I think for me, what inspired me to run for office is that it was the early experience of sitting at the TV at being 6 years old, and I'm seeing my people that look like me being horsewhipped, being drugged, being watered down by these big hoses. And I was so scared that I asked my mom and dad what was going on. They said, because we're fighting for our rights. That spurred me to think, what does that mean? So through that, my grandmother, Magnolia, always took me around to places where she was asked to talk, to speak. And so I learned that putting people first is the most important thing. And keeping them somewhat in a way that there's equity and inclusion. And so that's what's inspiring me now, because we have this brick now that's starting to come out, and especially in our Lynnwood area. And it's time for those bricks to be broken. It's time for people to say, hey, we are here for all of us, not just for the upper class. We are here for all of us. So that's what's inspired me and keeps me going.
And what is your platform?
My platform is that people first. People first.
All right, Nick, do you want me to read the question again?
I think I got it.
Okay.
So apologies, I'm freezing, so I may be shivering a little bit. But what inspired me to run for office, it really comes down to 3 words. Be the change. It's a quote attributed to Gandhi, and it's been inspiring people ever since. And when I look around the city, I see a lot of changes that need to happen. We do have a great city. It has great potential. There are opportunities abounding for us. But we need people on city council who are going to be that change, who are going to fix those systems and are going to have the knowledge and conviction to make votes, stick by their word, and actually push for advancements on things like housing, whether that's affordable housing or housing affordability. Public safety. We need folks who are committed to finding smart infrastructure improvements that can bring traffic easing to our arterial roads that are seeing cars just zooming down them. I talk to folks all the time about that, and that is a public safety concern. We need folks who are committed to our community justice center and making it a big success in our town, which we'll talk about that later. So I'm going to skip over that a little bit. And then finally, really trying to tackle the homelessness problem, which it's not just about the homeless themselves. There are great people in our area, like Robert Smiley's The Hand Up Project to partner with.
Yes.
But also the externalities that come from having these issues, whether that's needles in our parks that create unsafe environments for our kids, or just accessibility problems. My wife has a mobility handicap, and when we have people on the sidewalks camping out, when we have people on our trails lounging out through no fault of their own, it can just cause problems for accessibility, and we need everyone to be able to enjoy our infrastructure.
That everybody has a right for shelter, food, healthcare.
So Nick, I'm going to ask you this next question first, and then I'll ask Shirley. And this is good because you're a business owner. So what do you feel are the top concerns facing small business owners in Lynnwood, and what do you propose to address those concerns?
So at the beginning of the pandemic, it was just uncertainty. Uncertainty everywhere. I think for the first few months, we were being just blasted with emails from various departments, local, state, national, county, and sometimes the rules and recommendations and restrictions were contradicting each other. It was chaos. I think we can do a better job in the future when we have these kinds of emergencies by consolidating our communication and understanding that many of the entrepreneurs that power our small businesses are just single owners or managers and don't have the time or the energy, for that matter, to look at dozens and dozens and dozens of emails and decipher what the right solutions to these issues are. What can we do now? That's a very different question. We're now 19 months, I think, through this pandemic, and we're seeing a big convulsion in our economy. On the one hand, people don't remember which businesses are opened or closed, and I think our city, if we partnered with our tourism department, could create a promotional campaign that actually brought these local businesses right to people's doors and told them, yeah, go support LASA, your local Filipino fusion sandwich shop, or Around the Table, your local board game shop. Additionally, well, go on, I'm good.
Alrighty. And Shirley, for you, same question. What do you feel are the top concerns facing small business owners in Lynnwood, and what do you propose to address those concerns?
Well, first of all, I think that's the two-part question. I'm sort of organized at putting steps in my head that, first of all, we need to know the how. Process for the priorities is putting people first. It's always going to be my top thing. And we need good governance through transparency and accountability. We support our cultural diversity, social justice, and defend and protect our democracy. And then how we were going to do this, we can have a public policy needing attention. What we will do is up to the discussion that is raised, I should say, regarding housing economics, infrastructure, and our environment.
Okay. And that's a good segue into this next question, which I'll ask you first, Shirley, and then I'll ask Nick. Excluding changing housing and zoning codes, what do you propose to make Lynnwood better for seniors?
Oh, it's interesting. I go through the community and I ask some of these questions, and they say, especially for seniors. Now, what I understand is I'm a senior, so I think it's very important to know that elders need a little bit more attention. We need to have safe pathways that we can walk up and down our sidewalks, use our wheelchairs, etc. The second thing is that we also need a single payer. We don't need to have to pay out co-pays and things that take away our money that we don't have because most of us are on limited income. And I think the third thing is to know that to be more responsible in terms of the assistance that is given by other partners that we have, like Homage, for instance. And if we know how we can do those things, then we can really propel people, keep a senior safe, keep them wanting to be part of our environment, because our environment is changing. It's changed already. And I think it's important to know that our seniors, they have history, they bring something useful to the table, and I think we also need to include them at the table.
Excellent. And then, do you want me to reread the question?
No, that's fine. I think Shirley makes some great points. Accessibility is a big factor. Making sure our public spaces are safe for those who are mobility challenged. My wife's therapist has a great saying, everybody is only temporarily abled. And I think that's something important in our design choices when we talk about traffic intersections, making sure that they last long enough for folks who take longer to cross the road to get there safely and not feel stressed or rushed that they might trip over. Making sure our parks are ADA accessible. We're doing that right now in the Parks Department. They're putting money every year into fixing these ADA deficiencies. On top of that, just to, again, pile on with Shirley here, I really think we could do something about integrating our senior citizens into the fabric of our government. We already have a bunch of great citizen boards and commissions. There's a great city in Germany I've been reading about that has a department of, I think it's called future aging. It's some German word. But they actually have a senior council, a senior board that brings senior issues to the city. And I think integrating them better into our city via a board or a commission specifically designed for that age demographic would bring these issues to light. There were a number of times when I was watching city council, when I was watching that for years, and seniors would sit there and felt unheard. And they would come up to the podium and talk about their issues. And I think if we had a more formal format for that, it would be to the betterment of everybody.
Yeah.
All right, Nick, so you're going to get this question first, and I'll ask Shirley. In what ways could the city's comprehensive plan be improved to facilitate Lynnwood's housing action plan of an additional 9,826 units by 2044?
There's a lot to unpack in that question, and I've thought about what to say in these 60 seconds. There's not a lot of time. But the things I would really talk about would, one being a top-down audit of our building codes and our zoning, looking at what negatively affects affordability, and if these measures don't have an immediate public safety concern or a similar really urgent need, I would really advocate for thinking about removing them. I think they might have outlived their usefulness and might be exacerbating these problems that we see in affordability. Beyond that, it also would work to empower our small developers and the developers in our community to build the types of housing that we want to see. I'm a big proponent of gentle density. Everybody talks about the big density coming to our city center, and yeah, we're going to add thousands of new homes in our city center area before too long. But there's a lot of opportunity within our suburban neighborhoods to bring about duplexes, bring about new types of housing, smaller, modest types of housing that can't currently exist based on our current code. If we looked at reforming our structures, reforming our systems, we could actually create a sustainable format for bringing more dense communities that actually enhance the character of our neighborhoods. And I think that's what people want to see.
Excellent, thank you. Shirley, would you like me to reread the
Yes,
question?
please.
Absolutely. In what ways could the city's comprehensive plan be improved to facilitate Lynnwood's housing action plan of an additional 9,826 units by 2044?
I think that the council needs to be more vigilant. We enter into these contracts, and we sometimes don't follow up on those contracts. And when builders come into our cities and start building, sometimes they go ahead and take the privilege of making changes without considering council, without considering what the needs are. And I think it's important for us to have an oversight as a council member, oversight in knowing what these are going to, what the contractors and developers say, hold them accountable for what they say they're going to do and do what they say they're going to do. So I think that's a very important thing.
Excellent. And then if you're ready, I got another question for you, Shirley.
Okay.
What do you think is the most important infrastructure project needed in Lynnwood right now?
Infrastructure is we talked about this before, it has to do with so many people coming into our city that it's important for us to be prepared with an increased population. And we really truly need to have a wastewater plant. We need to look at these old buildings, these old equipment, and get it up to date, because the draw is not only from the people that population is increasing, but it's also because of the fact that if we also have almost have something that's really crisis, like something that happened with Katrina and something that's happened to the most latest tornado, we've got to be prepared for things like that, and we're not.
Excellent. And then, Nick, same question to you. What do you think is the most important infrastructure project needed right now in Lynnwood?
I think beyond a doubt it would be creating a robust town square park. And I know infrastructure people think roads and asphalt and things like that. But there's a lot of things that cities are responsible for when it comes to infrastructure, and creating these spaces for people to gather, creating these centers of gravity for people to gravitate towards is really vital. Right now we have a housing crisis. People know about that, but it also impacts many other infrastructure projects when the price of land goes up. In our downtown city center area, the price is only going to increase if we don't act soon and actually acquire the land for a town square park where people can gravitate towards, where we can host events, where people can basically treat it as their living room, who are living down there, these thousands of folks that are going to be living there. We're going to instead have people getting in their cars and going elsewhere. And that's bad for our infrastructure. It's bad for congestion. We need to create a walkable city center. It's vital that we do this, and we need to act soon.
Excellent. This next question is kind of a fun, creative question. It's a little scenario here for you, and I'll ask Nick this question first. If given a $500,000 grant to use in Lynnwood, how would you allocate it in the best interest of residents?
This is a funny question because we're debating this right now in all the citizen boards and commissions. The American Rescue Plan Act actually diverted funds to local municipalities. I think we have about $12 million to spend in our city on things like this, and we're debating. The city, to its credit, is involving the citizen boards and commissions, all dozen of us, I think, to get involved, voice our opinions, and talk about what we can do to best serve the residents. $500,000 doesn't go very far in public investment, unfortunately. While we could do something temporary that might help some people for a short amount of time, like scholarships, aid, things like that, I still think it would best be used towards capital investment towards an infrastructure project, like I said, that town square park. One of the great things about being on the Parks and Recreations Board is I've had the pleasure of talking and working with Deputy Director Sarah Olson, who is a fiend when it comes to acquiring grants. Grants can multiply the money that the city has at its disposal to fund these kinds of projects, but it requires a starting fund. And so if we could convert that $500,000 into $2.5 million, I would want to see that happen.
Excellent. And then would you like me to reread the question, Shirley?
No, that's okay.
Excellent.
My answer is going to be very short. I believe in investing in economic development. We have to really think about the variety of needs within our city. We need to have a mission to assist sole proprietors and middle market businesses grow. And that's the only way I think we would establish an economic gardening program. And I do agree with what Governor Inslee has proposed with his job plan, Washington, building a thriving economy and job growth for all.
Excellent. Well, I got another question here for you, Shirley.
Okay.
If there's ever a budget shortfall or a recession, what recommendations would you present on how to mitigate the shortfall?
Well, we went through this recession, the 2008 recession, and because of that, we, upon the city, of course, had to lay off some of the staff members and so forth. And we lost, I think, the individuals that really knew the backbones of what it is what we needed most. And so what I would do is I cut expenses very carefully and really determine where the investments can be placed. I agree with Nick here. Raise revenues and expand economic base, cars, and because You know, we lose a lot of things money-wise out of our city because we're not offering what the people want. And so that's important to make sure that their likes and their differences are welcome, their opinions are welcome, and listen to those. We're not a very good listener in terms of city
Excellent.
leaders.
And Nick, same question to you.
There are two things I would really propose. On the one hand, it would be intelligently using our reserve to save city services that are really important, but also making sure to manage it in a way that it will get us through that tough time. Lynnwood is very susceptible to economic shocks due to our reliance on sales tax. Not every resident knows this, but most cities rely on sales tax revenues for about 20% of their overall budget. Lynnwood's is 40%. Sales tax is a big deal, and if you go to the mall, you'll see why instantly. So what can we do at that point? Well, then it's about prioritization, and I think this crisis that we've had with COVID really showed us what we need to change about how we prioritize, how we communicate about what needs to be prioritized. The Parks Department in our city created an ABCD letter grade system like we're all used to in school. And it created much needed clarification about the impacts of cuts to the department. In fact, I think I heard later on that other departments were going to adopt that approach. I think really promoting a plan to have a clear guidance and a clear clarification of what cuts mean in departments so that our city council members, because whatever the case, we're only one of 7, we need to be able to build a consensus around our shared values, and a clear guide to what these cuts mean, I think, is vital.
Excellent. All right, so this next question does have a bit of context, so if you need me to reread anything, just feel free to ask. But I'll ask this question to Nick first and then to Shirley. Earlier this year, the Washington State Legislature passed a series of police reform laws regarding use of force. Overwhelmingly, law enforcement officers throughout the state argue that these new laws inhibit them from catching criminals and keeping communities and themselves safe. Would you support a resolution requesting the governor, the Washington State Legislature, and the Attorney General to assist in providing clarification of these new law enforcement standards and requirements?
This is a strange issue. You know, on the one hand, I think this is a legislature's issue. This is something that needs to be clarified between them, and I really think they probably did a poor job of communicating with our police departments and with our police officers. I've sat down and talked for an hour each with Chief Nelson, as well as the president of the Lynnwood Police Guild, Ron Moore. And what was clear to me was there was confusion about how to implement these policies. They felt as if they weren't necessarily consulted, that there wasn't a clear line of communication about what this meant. I think that could be better resolved, but I'm not really in favor of politicizing these types of issues. I think this is something that the state legislature needs to work out with the police, and I would urge them to do so, but not through an official channel like having the city call them out.
Excellent. Would you like me to reread the question?
No, thank you. I agree with Nick on that one.
Okay.
I have no comment.
Can I ask you a follow-up question?
You sure can.
Absolutely. So regarding public safety, what do you think the city is doing right, and where might there be opportunity for improvement?
I think public safety is an issue that is up to all of us. We have to understand that people do not think the same. Their needs are different. And as far as the public safety aspect, I think also that our police officers, when I think of public safety, people always think about police officers. And then there's the idea of defunding. I think there's a misunderstanding of what that word should mean. And it's not that we don't have police officers. It means that we can use some of that money to institute the mental services that are really needed sometimes with other populations. And I think if we really think about this, we need, again, to bring people to the table to make them understand that some of the words that they're using are not what they really mean, and clarify.
Excellent. And Nick, I would want to give you an opportunity to answer that follow-up question as well. So regarding public safety, what do you think the city is doing right, and where might there be opportunity for improvement?
Sure. I'm going to take a different tact here. Public safety is more than just how people encounter our law enforcement and police, and it's an absolute tragedy whenever there is a fatality in those circumstances. But there's also a lot of other tragedies going on, and often it happens around traffic intersections. One thing that I think we are doing well is the 196th Street Boulevard project, which is going to create a tree-lined boulevard that actually keeps pedestrians away from traffic. I would love to expand that somehow. I know it's super expensive, but at least take some of the lessons we're learning about how to create safer pedestrian environments and expand that throughout the city. Beyond that, again, when I talk to folks when I'm out walking, I always hear people talking about the people speeding down arterial roads, and that's just one of the changes we've had over the last decade or so as people have started to use Google Maps and things like that to get around traffic. Yeah, 196th Street is congested, but that doesn't mean you should be zooming 40 miles an hour through a 20-mile-an-hour arterial road in a close-knit neighborhood. Things we could do to fix that don't just involve changing the speed limit. That doesn't actually change behavior. What we could do is something that's maybe more affordable, like introducing speed humps, which are like more moderate forms of a speed bump, into these neighborhoods that actually discourage and make it much less exciting and fun to speed down these roads. So far, I've heard a lot of good reception to that idea, and I would want to engage that with our Public Works Department.
Excellent. So Shirley, I'll ask you this question, and then I'll ask Nick. What do you think the city can do to increase engagement by people of color or underrepresented communities in the city's economic development?
I think when I hear that question, to me it's more or less the idea of involving individuals again to the table, because we have these quick answers and so forth, but we don't really understand. They don't really understand what that is. What does that mean? I think also that to increase as far as the different cultures, bring the different cultures together more often is another way of engaging, and also being very visible in the community of the activities that they are involved in. That's another way of making some equity out of our cultures.
Excellent. And Nick, same question to you.
There are two parts. Obviously, one is just going to be having our city council members actively go out into where these communities are, where they shop, where they congregate, and meeting and hearing their concerns and just showing and providing information, being a nexus of information that they can access. Sometimes that may involve bringing an interpreter or something like that along, but making these appearances, making it known that you're going to be there, and showing that the city just isn't out to get them or isn't just there to take their money and stuff. It's there to actively help and facilitate growth. The second part of that is actively working to make spaces for these entrepreneurs to build up. Strip malls get a lot of a bad rap, but I always call them like the incubators of new businesses. And so you see a lot of experimentation all across the country happening in these affordable areas for people to start their businesses. When we're talking about economic development, we can't just talk about it from a top-down perspective. We have to just provide spaces for these folks to start their own lives.
Excellent. And then, did you want to follow up with that?
Well, and also acknowledge that what they bring to the table is their really life's experiences themselves. So we can learn about that as well. And to me, I think the more that we get to know each other as a community, the better off we all are. Not just the few people, but all of us.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, this is the last question, and I'll ask Nick first, and then I'll let Shirley finish up.
30 seconds or less.
So there is much discussion about the term equity, but what does equity mean to you?
To me, as a student of history, I always think of equity as simply acknowledging history. Acknowledging that history has been sometimes written by the victor, as some of those old war historians would say, and that we need to acknowledge that there are different perspectives and that not everyone has been treated equally. And when we simply look at fixing systems from if we simply look at fixing systems from a basis of everyone starting on the same ground, that we're fundamentally misunderstanding how things have worked, how systems that we have set up over the decades, over the centuries, have impacted communities of color and the marginalized, and not actually providing a fair opportunity, a fair shake at life for everybody in our community.
Thank you, Nick. And then Shirley, what does equity mean to you?
Fair and just. Fair and just. And of course, I always, since I'm probably a lot older than you guys are, I have been experienced in that area, being fair and just. And I feel that that's the most important for us to remember, is that we're all here to help each other. We're all here to help each other grow. And that's what we need to start really thinking as a group, not as a person of one person. So that's how I look at it. I'm freezing.
Yep.
Do you want to do a closing?
We're striving together.
Yes.
Well, I'd like to thank both of you for attending today's candid interview.
Yeah.
And I'll start with you, Shirley, for some closing remarks.
All right. Well, thank you so much for inviting it. These are very well thought out questions, and it certainly gives us fodder to consider.
My wife and I like to call Lynnwood our forever home. We just feel so grateful and fortunate that I've been able to start my dream business here. I love what I do. I get to create decent jobs. We do a ton of philanthropy, and we get to build community.
Yeah.
I just love that our city has spaces for these types of small businesses to thrive. And if you listen to the things I talk about, it often comes back to just creating more spaces for these types of places to thrive. I think these types of small businesses are just as much amenities as anything else in our city. The Courtyard Cafe, the at-home bakery like the one I grew up in, the weekend cider house. We should strive to allow our residents, our communities, to express themselves in whichever way they choose, and sometimes that's creating something exciting for the community.
Excellent.
Thank you.